Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the live show. Tonight is a special broadcast. You know, you guys see me in my suit and tie. I was in court all day. But we have a special, amazing story. So tonight the cameras are a little different. You can see the backdrop. You know what's going on. Tonight is a story about parental alienation. And tonight, I want you to be the judge. Tonight, as you join our show, we want you to know that the question is, did the courts make the wrong decision? Did they do this wrong? Did they get it wrong? You be the judge. You hear the story. This is live. And as always, we do this for the children because we love you. So, I'm going to allow some people to come in the room. And I have some notes because I'm going to be the interviewer tonight in the back. I will be a co-host. And I will be your co-pilot. Tonight, Richard Cross will be your pilot. He will be on, and he will be the pilot, and he's going to interview. And right here where I'm sitting tonight, Chris Gray is going to be sitting. He drove a long way to do this in the studio with you guys. So this is raw. It's unfiltered. There may be some language not suitable for children, so if you want to get your children out tonight, you can. We are going to try to keep it PG-13, but this is a live show. Anything can happen. You might hear a doorbell ring or a phone ring tonight. This is a live show. So we want to welcome you to the show, and I'm going to go over some disclaimers. Before Richard comes on here, we have to go over some disclaimers, right? So disclaimer number one, I am not a bar attorney, although I look like one right now, right? I'm not a bar attorney. I'm your host right here, Coach Amuls at Amuls Vision. Let me slow down because tonight is going to be very interesting. This is a big show that we've been leading up to, and it has a lot to do with family courts. It has a lot to do with parental alienation. And the question, like I said tonight, is going to be, did the courts get it wrong? You be that judge tonight, and you make that decision. So right now, I'm going to go over disclaimers. Drop in your cities, drop in your states, tell us where you're from so we can say hello. We'd love to talk to you guys and get to know where you're from. This is a live show. It is interactive. You can drop your comments. We will have some moderators down here in the bottom, and they will speak to you throughout the night. And if not, they'll get back with you. This is a conversation that we don't want to end. We want you guys to be involved. We want this to be an open discussion. We want open dialogue. For us, it's all about transparency in the family courts. It's about getting child support right. It's about getting custody right. It's about having the arrangements right and access and ability for parents to make decisions for their children's behalf for their best interest. So, remember, I am not a bar attorney. We cannot give legal advice on this show. Anything we say cannot be taken as a legal opinion, as we're not bar attorneys. We don't want the bar coming after us or shutting our show down, so let's get that out of the way. Next, we have to go over a disclaimer called the medical disclaimer. We are not medical professions. We're not medical professionals. We're not doctors. So we tonight cannot offer any medical advice. So you understand what I'm saying, right, guys? Don't do it. Listen to me. Don't do it. We are not giving medical advice. Although I look like a medical doctor, I'm not a doctor. So we can't, here at Amuls Vision, give any medical advice. In just about 3 minutes, I'm going to bring Chris Gray on live, and he is going to be sitting right here, and y'all will have the right to decide on your own. And we're going to get into this deep, as Richard's had plenty of time to talk to him, and I've actually had time to go over this show for a little bit with him myself personally. It's pretty deep, so you might as well grab a box of Kleenex, and you might as well get ready to grab a pen and paper, because some of these details that you're going to hear today won't be heard anywhere else. A lot of parents won't talk about what happened and how it went wrong. But he is a great father, and we thank him so much for coming on here. So, as always, at the end of the show, I'll come back on here, and we'll pray with you guys, as we do for each and every show. We pray for these children. We pray for these fathers. But most and foremost, we want you guys to know that this is a live show. Anything can happen. And like I said, just know that Richard's going to be hosting it. If you guys can't hear us, drop in the comments. If you can't hear Richard for any reason, drop in the comments. I'm going to try to get Chris to speak loud, but this is a very sensitive subject. So we ask that everybody be understanding and be respectful on this show to everybody. Going through these kind of emotions is opening a old wound, and a lot of us are trying to heal. So if this relates to you tonight, parental alienation, if it's affected you or your children, you're in the right place. And this is the right place to be, because we do know how to make the changes, but we need your support and your help to make those changes. So thank you for joining us. I'm Coach Amuls, of Amuls Vision, and I'm going to bring Richard Cross in here, and right before we bring Chris in here. So let me give you guys a few moments. I'm going to give everybody a few moments to share this live. I'm going to give you guys a few moments to invite anybody you want into this, and we're going to get started here in just about in 2 minutes. I'm going to bring them in here. So y'all will not see me on the camera. What y'all do is y'all hear me. I'll actually be right here interviewing him, just like they would on a newscast. So y'all will have the right to hear me. Y'all know who I am. I don't think y'all need to see me in the camera. But I'm going to bring Chris Gray on in just 1 minute, and I'm going to allow some more people to come in the room. But tonight is a deep story about parental alienation, and we want you to be the judge tonight. We want you to decide whether the courts got it wrong. Welcome Accessories on Me. Marta, thank you so much for joining us. You have been an advocate for children's rights and personally touched a lot of children's life. You have helped us generously with this page, so if you guys ever want to check out Accessories on Me, they're down here. We thank you. Sam, Jenny, we thank you so much. We know that you're going through some stuff where your freedom of speech is being infringed upon. We care about your First, your Fourth, your 14th. We care about the entire Constitution. So we want to reach out to you, Sam, and tell you that we do love you and we support you in your battles. And hopefully maybe tonight later you may be able to come on or tomorrow. But we have that. We do have also a couple politicians that I spoke with last night and over the last 2 weeks. They're going to come on and they're going to give you guys a chance to speak with them outside the bounds of what the political arena is. They're going to come out here and let you guys ask questions. I know a lot of people have questions on how laws are made and changed. I do know a little bit, but I'm not a complete full-blown politician yet. So we'll bring a couple of those politicians out in the next coming weeks. And we want you guys to be the judge, like I said. So I'm going to get up from here, and I will come back on here, but I'm going to invite Chris Gray on this show, and we're going to talk for just a minute. And so if y'all are ready, let's get this party started. I'm Coach Amul P. You will hear me in the background. Welcome Chris Gray to the show, guys. I'm going to move out the frame now. This is a live show. So, Chris, if you'd like to take a seat here, this is a live show. And I will be able to see your comments. So if y'all would like to say hello to Chris, I'm going to give a moment. There's a lot of cameras. There's a lot of lights in here. And it is not easy to go through this. Chris, would you like to say hello?
Hello, everybody.
And this is a big story that we've been working on for many, many weeks. Chris, before we bring Richard Cross in here to take over, we've got a couple questions. Where was your case located at, and where did it begin?
It began and ended in Yuma, Arizona.
So Yuma, Arizona is where it began. And how many children do you have?
Well, I have 2.
So you have 2 children, and it was of the same mother?
Same mother, yes.
Okay. And were y'all married, or y'all were not married?
We were married.
All right. And so y'all were married. Can you take us through the beginning of it, just a little bit of the relationship, and then how it fell apart to where we are today, just a little beginning of it, a backdrop of just what started this. What led you to family court? How about that?
Well, there really wasn't a whole lot of animosity, at least as far as I was concerned, that caused the split up. It was just something where a couple people kind of naturally just grew apart, and we were kind of kept at a distance due to work conditions at the time, and that probably fed into it, where we both kind of realized probably that, we didn't really miss each other as much as we probably should during those extended periods of absences. And eventually, kind of came to the conclusion that divorce was probably the best option for us both.
So how old were the children when you guys separated?
We're probably looking at 3 and 4 and 5.
So they're in 3 and 4. And then we had a discussion earlier. The first sign of parental alienation, I think you said one of your earliest memories was about popping your daughter for not cleaning up. And take us through this story just a little bit of the first time that you saw a little bit of parental alienation, or what you know now to be parental alienation.
Well, I didn't think, too much of it at the time. I didn't even know what the term parental alienation even meant, or, anything of the term whatsoever. But my daughter was probably 3 at the time, and it was the first time she ever kind of showed an action of defiance. She was just sitting on the floor playing with her toys, and it was time for us to go ahead and go to bed. So I told her to go ahead and I'll pick up your toys and get them cleaned up so we can go to bed. And she told me, "No, you do it," towards myself. So I walked over to her and I gave her a little pop on the butt. Nothing that was, it was an attention getter. I'm pretty sure it was the first time, and maybe probably the only time actually I ever, gave her a corrective pop on the butt. And she immediately started crying, and I looked over and her mother had her arms spread out, saying, "Oh, come here." And she gave her this big embrace and rubbed her on her back and told her it's going to be okay. And that really stuck with me because, for one, I didn't want to physically put my hands on my daughter, and
Right.
even though it wasn't anything harsh, it's not something I wanted to do, but it's something you felt like you needed to do, because you can't sit with a 3-year-old at that time and explain to them how you need to clean up after yourself and learn these life
So you was
lessons.
instilling structure and some discipline in your child as they were growing.
I was trying
And
to.
then, and I had freedom to say this, an alienator will be that soft place to land and play hero and act like the child's a victim. I agree totally with you. The child wasn't a victim. The child was actually being corrected in a proper manner. And I think I have no problem with spanking children if it comes to your 3-year-old acting bad, if you got to pop their butt. And a lot of parents would agree with you. In your situation where she puts her arms out, it actually defies the actual action of correctness. So I agree with you. And I wanted to mention that story because you said that was one of your earliest memories of which you now know to be parental alienation. Now, I'm going to bring Richard Cross on here because I think that Richard has a lot more knowledge on this, but there is a lot of questions. Whether the courts got it wrong, whether it would have been different had you been able to make decisions based upon your child's medical needs. So I'm going to bring Richard Cross on here. Richard, let me bring him in, and it's going to split the screen. You guys need to let me know if you can see him, okay? So I'm going to add Richard in. And bear with me here, Chris. We're going to bring Richard on. This is live. And you guys can hear me, so you guys know that I'm here. So let's bring Richard on, and let me know, guys, you can see Chris. Can
You
y'all
want to
see
move
Chris?
it up a little bit.
Move it up a little
just a hair.
bit, he says. Is that better?
Just a little bit more. Oh, right there. You're good. Just
You
a
let
little
me
bit up,
know.
actually.
This
Sorry.
is live, and we hope all of our viewers understand that this is live, and this is how it happens when it's live, okay? So you guys let me know. Can you see Chris in the frame pretty good?
Yeah, he looks good.
All right,
How's it going, Chris?
I'm hanging in there. I wish I didn't have the subject material knowledge and experience to share with you, but since unfortunately I do, kind of feel obligated to share a story that it's kind of late for my situation, but maybe it's not too late for someone else.
Yeah. So I'm going to start by Tony. I want to tell you look great, man. I thought you dressed up well for this one, so you look good. And then Chris.
I'm going to get you up the show. Go ahead.
Chris, I think you have one of the best stories of parental alienation just because of how well it's documented. A lot of times people are trying to make unprovable claims of alienation. And what I mean by that is they're very difficult to take into a courtroom and prove them right to a judge or to other people. In your case, I mean, there's messages, and there's not just messages. There's messages between multiple parties that exhibit and exude alienation. So I kind of wanted to talk about who are the individuals that started and have continuously alienated you from your children.
Well, that would be the children's mother and her live-in best friend who is kind of considered by the kids as an aunt. Aunt Debbie.
And of those two people, which one do you think has done more of the alienating of your two children?
Well, it's really hard to say. I would say their mother. I have documentation of just maybe a 6 or 8 month time period through the Facebook messages that show things. There's no telling how much is there before that and how much stuff was done in person when they were there. There was a small percentage of time that the kids were actually with me, So we're looking at a large percentage of time that there was no need to message the kids to tell them things. It was told face to face. Um, I see the two as being a partner in crime for the most part. One
To talk,
serving the other one.
sorry about that. So to kind of talk about that time split, what was your original parenting plan time split? How much time did you have with the kid versus your ex-wife?
Well, I had a block in the summertime. I don't remember the exact time. I want to say it was like a 6 or 7 week block in the summertime, and then we had an alternating winter break. So there, because Arizona to Georgia, it wasn't really. There was a lot of the last time that the parental plan was modified. It took in consideration that you can't really give one parent every other weekend any longer, and certain particular holidays that you would like to be there for your children.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of add, a little bit of summertime in there.
Let me throw in there, Richard. What I got out of the pre-interview was it was more of a Brown's Law of a every other weekend type of visitation, and we know that doesn't work.
Yep.
But it was more of a every other weekend thing, and everybody knows that just doesn't work out. And later on, Richard, we'll talk about this as well with Chris. Chris, your children were schooled through an online program. Can you explain this online program that the mother put them in?
Well, I found out a lot later after it happened that I believe my son had just finished the 5th grade, and my daughter had just finished the 6th grade. That their mother pulled them out of the regular school and put them into an online school program where they did it from home. Um, I never knew about this. I was never consulted about it. Um, the children, when I inquired about school, whenever we had visitation time, they pretended like they went to they never once said they went to an online school and did it from home. They were obviously told not to tell me these things here. The last thing I was thinking that these kids would never, that they would be pulled and do an online school and I wouldn't know about it. That was the farthest thing from my imagination at the time. I know there's a lot of things that were weird about their schooling and their education, and I kind of wrote it up to Yuma just having a really crappy school system, which is, as far as I know, they do. But it did seem like, there was a lot of things that these children should have known that they didn't know. And it kind of struck a nerve.
So their mother, she didn't communicate with you that she was taking them out of public school and putting them into a homeschool program, did she?
No, she unilaterally made decisions. As the parental plan was made up, things were supposed to have been jointly. She did enjoy final decision-making authority, which is
Okay.
understandable because being the primary custodian,
Mm-hmm.
someone had that primary, or final decision-making authority. However, it not only it was expected, it's actually written out that things are supposed to be discussed between the parents. And there's a reason for that. Something as, as simple as pulling the kids out from the school and doing the program they did. You have to discuss that with me because if I have some kind of objection to that for whatever reason, I need to know that what's going on so that I can take action in court if I so need to. Because just because she has legal decision-making authority doesn't mean she can actually do whatever she wants. It just means that it kind of comes down to her, but I have to be given the opportunity to know what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
so I can do other avenues if it's an issue.
So I asked this question prior to the winter of 2021. Is there anything else besides education that your ex-wife wasn't communicating with you about that was allowing her to make decisions or impact your parenting time or impact the children during your parenting time with you? And this is prior to winter 2021, because I want to talk about that independently.
Well, still on the school issue, once we had a big blow up that I'm sure we're going to get to here a little bit later on here. When my daughter opened up to me and basically became a whistleblower
Mm-hmm.
on their family situation out in Arizona. She informed me that their mother and the mother's friend had been doing their schoolwork for them online. I inquired about it with the school system and was able to get their state test and saw that my son had scored at the very bottom in these tests that he had to go take up in Phoenix periodically, but he was a straight A student on paper. So, it was pretty obvious, and there was no reason to even think my daughter would make this up anyway. So I'm not sure who would make some up of that anyhow. But, everything she told me, it made sense, and it was backed up by, when I went to question it. Even the school themselves agreed when I spoke to the academic advisors and expressed my concerns. They told me they pulled up his tests and his grades and said they do not match, and they do feel that there is someone else probably doing his schoolwork for him. But unfortunately, they told me that there's absolutely nothing we can do about it unless his mother admits to doing it without any kind of evidence. Their hands are tied and can't do anything, which I found to be just astonishing that they had this
Yep.
evidence and would not push the issue at all.
Did you see anything about your kids that showed that they weren't receiving a proper education, or made you believe they maybe weren't getting the education that you thought they were?
Well, again, a lot of times I would question them on simple little things that you would think they would know at that age. Simple little things as to, what states border, Arizona, what country is just south of Arizona, a whole lot of, little simple things like that they should definitely know. And we're completely unaware. They really didn't even want to discuss it. And it didn't really make sense to me at the time, but looking back, I understand now why they didn't want to discuss it, because they weren't to let me know that they were not in regular school.
Is there anything else that she failed to communicate with you about during that time prior to winter 2021? And I'm not digging for anything in particular. I'm just curious, it sounds like she wasn't communicating with you, which is one of the things an alienator will use. They'll not contact you, and then they'll only contact you when it's of urgent need or they need something financially. And then that becomes a pattern of you're not contacting kids, or you're not reaching out. And in reality, the other individual is just poorly communicating with you and never really informing you of anything such that you could inquire or understand what's going on in that minor child's life.
No, the biggest issue, like I said, was the school. My daughter did inform me that, both of the children had been provided alcohol. Something like that should have been discussed with me, as far as I'm concerned, before they were to ever give, I'm not going to sit here and say I don't think personally, I don't think a 15-year-old should be, experiencing alcohol in any sense whatsoever. When the kid's a little bit older, I think it's more of a gray area where you want your kids to maybe experience something. But that's definitely something that should be discussed. If they felt like that was appropriate at 15 years old or 14 years old, that the children should be, exposed to alcohol so they could try it or whatever. Whatever the rationale was behind it, I have no clue what the rationale was. It makes no sense to me.
Now, Richard, let's backtrack just a little bit for the viewers that are joining us. Let's talk about this, that originally when Chris had moved, and you moved from Yuma to where was it?
To Georgia.
Well, you moved up north when the children were young, right?
Right. I moved to Tucson.
So originally, Richard, the story is that he moved to Tucson and he was driving and working a lot. Take us through that working and driving to see your kids as much as you could. I think it's very important for the audience to understand that his relationship at one point was very strong before it became to this point through the alienation. Tell us about your driving and how you were working, and you was in law enforcement. So let's talk about that just for a moment.
Well, to back it up, then, I was employed with the U.S. Border Patrol for a time period. Had a medical problem exposed while at the training academy in New Mexico, and ended up having to come back to Arizona. And while in a medical recovery status, was working out of Tucson. Their headquarters there, doing various administrative things. At this time here, a lot of times I was working was a midnight, 8 o'clock in the morning shift, 5 days a week. And whenever my last day ended at 8 o'clock in the morning, I would go and drive down to Yuma to go pick up the kids for a visiting time, and completely skip sleep, because normally my sleep would be getting off work and sleeping. But in order to maximize the limited amount of time that I had, I'd go there and pick them up. I would sleep Saturday night with the kids, and then return them Sunday, probably around maybe 6 o'clock, and then drive back to Tucson, another 3.5, 4 hours, and then go back to work at midnight again. So I only slept, 5 days a week during this time period.
And this,
And I want to
go ahead, Emil.
Good. I want to highlight this because this is a job that he was working very hard to be able to provide the time, the money, and the resources to be a father, and he was placed on child support. We had to talk about this for a moment because child support plays a key factor and a role in this. Tell us a little bit about your child support and how it was established. So, what judge did it and how did it go, and how much of your paycheck did they take?
Well, it comes back to before the divorce proceeding here, I was required to submit financial affidavits and documentation to show what the income was. I was unable to access my online account because when it was initially set up, everything went to where the mother was there in Yuma. So on 3 different occasions, I had a password sent to my home of record, which at that time was Yuma. I was kind of, I guess in hindsight, I was kind of stupid, but, I really didn't know what I was dealing with at that point in time. When she said that the password didn't arrive, I took her for her word. And it took 3 times for a password not to arrive before I could alleviate the issue. But in the meantime, I had to go to court with no financial records. And her lawyer were able to show, supposedly they had only 2 pay stubs only, which was a June and a July pay stub, which was reflecting working a midnight shift, working weekends at that time. I had a short time period where I was working weekends. I worked the holidays as well. So in essence, I had 2 months of paychecks where it was like double what I normally would get paid. It was just those 2 months. The ones they just magically happen to have in possession of, those were the 2 months that they just had. And they were able to extrapolate from that and make a whole income for the entire year, which was just a ridiculous amount. I wish I remembered that amount, but it was ridiculous. Upon the divorce, there was a automatic income deduction order placed. And to my understanding, the government can only garnish 75% of your wages. And when my paycheck was garnished 75% of my wages, I still owed $307 of child support. So in essence, and I'm just ballparking a number here, but 85% of my paycheck was support, using those numbers that weren't correct, and obviously not correct.
So that the child support was based off an astronomical amount that would leave a father or even a mother in that situation without the ability to afford to provide for themselves adequately. It would create a financial hardship. Now, who was the name of this judge? Just so we can know who this judge's name was.
Her name is Mary Elena Cruz.
So just in case y'all want to write it down, Ms. Cruz
She's, just to verify, she's no longer on the bench, though, right? If I recall.
Not down in She eventually somehow managed to move herself up to the Arizona Appeals Court circuit.
Really?
Last I saw, Rich's.
Wow, imagine your chances of getting an appeal after you've already been instilled with this child support for 10 years, 12 years, 8 years, and getting it reduced. And you did file different modifications and requests to do it. Were you able to do it, or did they just dismiss that when you went back to get your child support modified because that actually wasn't your true income?
Well, once the divorce was, all this took place here, I magically was able to finally access my account. I was able to talk to someone in the administrative office who was able to get my home of record changed to Tucson address. And once that went through, I was able to ask for, the new password to access my account. And somehow that password came to me 2 days later. And I was able to access my account. And then I was able to print out, the entire year's worth of leave earning statements. And I took them down to Yuma to speak to an attorney down there because, I was financially broken at that point. I was starting to build arrearages in child support, even though my paycheck was being garnished 75%. And I spoke to an attorney and explained to him what happened. And he advised me we can do a motion for reconsideration where we go in there and explain to Judge Cruz what happened. That I diligently did try to get my pay stubs, and now I was able to finally access that account and get those. And we presented her with, this is the true income that he had. Only Judge Cruz, she completely dismissed completely disregarded that the numbers used to compute child support were erroneous, completely disregarded that, and just simply said that he should have had this during the divorce case.
And so the word discretion comes in place, Richard. I want to speak about this word discretion. Now, if you get on the bad side of a judge, we all know 24 million Americans can admit you probably don't have a good outcome. So his motion was dismissed. Let's continue. I'll let you go on, but I want the viewers to understand that this word discretion in family court violates almost all due process. But let's continue on.
Well,
So,
I want to touch on that just a little bit
go
more
ahead.
here, because this is something that's really a problem. It should have been pretty clear that, I couldn't prove that my password didn't get lost in the mail 3 times to Yuma, and then when it gets sent to Tucson, that it arrived somehow. But judges do have discretion, and they should have taken note of that, because you would think a judge would want to have all the evidence in front of them and have it complete and accurate, so they can make a decision based upon true and accurate information, and not just something that they're just guessing on. And we are able to go back in front of that judge and show you made a decision based on numbers that were inaccurate. And we got a pretty good story as to why. A little bit of judicial common sense should tell there was something weird going on in this case here, why he was not able to get his pay stubs. And we were able to show I was in a position where I had in front of a judge accurate information for her to write a wrong decision, and they had zero ambition to do so. It completely went by the wayside, and I just don't get it. When you have evidence to show that a decision was incorrectly made, why not fix it right then and there?
Great question. You guys tell us what you think, viewers. If they got it wrong or the information was incorrect, why not get it right? Let us know what you think. Richard, continue on.
Yeah, so just to recap, right? You were in Tucson shortly after the marriage. You had a kind of every other weekend parenting plan. You were commuting 3 hours from Tucson to Yuma to have visitation. You were coming early, returning them as late as you could so that you could maintain as much time as possible. All while your child support's jacked up as high as possible because they got your highest earning pay stubs out of the year. They use that to calculate your average income for the year and essentially set your child support at a threshold that was unmaintainable by the income that you made or really made on average each week, right? Or biweekly, whatever it was. So let's start talking about the lead up to you moving to Georgia. So eventually you moved to Georgia. When you moved to Georgia, is that when you instituted some type of standard long distance parenting plan? And how did that first visitation leading up to winter of 2021 go in that long distance parenting plan?
I don't remember the exact dates, but at some point in time after moving back, and just so it's clear with anyone viewing here, something that happened in Tucson when all this child support happened, I was completely broke. I had 25% of my paycheck left after garnishment, and I still owed probably $300 on top of that in order to stay current. The only way I was able to even survive was I stayed with a coworker at his apartment for free. I did whatever chores around the apartment and helped out as much as I could. But I was able to stay there for free, and I joined the Arizona National Guard as well. Because at the time, being a Border Patrol intern, I wasn't allowed to have the only employment I could have got outside of the Border Patrol was something that they legally couldn't stop me from doing, and that was the National Guard. So I joined the National Guard. That week in the month and 2 weeks in the summer, paid I was getting from the National Guard was the only reason I was able to even drive down to Yuma and have the gas money to go visit the kids and pay for vehicle insurance and things of that nature. That was the only way I was able to even keep things intact. And when I moved to Georgia, I was still in the Arizona National Guard. I was waiting for a security clearance to go through, another background check, which I'd already done one before that the government wasted money on, to do explosive ordnance disposal. So I was kind of in the holding pattern. So there wasn't really a need to change the parental agreement at that time, the visitation, because as soon as my background check came through, I'd be going down to Florida to the Air Force Base for a school that was going to last a year. So, I was in a situation that my hours and availability to be able to do anything for at least 1 year was going to be very dynamic. So it was sometime after that we actually revisited it and adjusted the parenting plan that took into consideration the long distance.
Okay. How long after entering into that long distance plan did you start to realize the uptick in alienation tactics by the mother and the then friend Debbie of the mother?
Well, I didn't really have any inclination of it. I do recall an incident where I went out to Arizona to pick up the kids and was going to bring them back to Georgia. We were driving, and my now fiance was with me, and we took the kids to San Diego to go to the SeaWorld and play around the San Diego area for a day before we drove back. And I vividly remember, I believe it was a Benihana's we were pulling into and getting ready to go into a restaurant. My daughter asked me why me and her mom got divorced. And I was really taken back by the question. That was the first time my daughter had ever brought up divorce whatsoever. We'd never discussed it with them. I never had, a big question about it. And I was trying to formulate an answer, that she could understand on her level, why we split up. And before I could even answer, she said, Mommy says you divorced because of your drug use. And that just really threw me for a loop. Obviously, most people watching this, don't know me, but I'm pretty much as anti-drug as it gets. I've never even smoked pot in my entire life. Luckily, I had somebody with me who, one, they witnessed it, but two, knew me well enough at that time to know that was complete BS. And, I just kind of brushed it off. I told my daughter that, you must have just misunderstood what she said. I don't do drugs. I never have. You must have just misunderstood what she said. At the time, I was thinking, why would you tell my daughter, even if that was true, why would you tell our daughter that, my drug use is why we split up? The truth is, we just kind of grew apart and just really wasn't emotionally connected any longer. And there's nothing wrong with telling your daughter that and trying to explain that to her. But instead went above and beyond that. Instead of telling them the truth, made up something that was totally inflammatory.
And let me say something, Richard. A lot of parenting plans for you viewers that are watching do have a stipulation not to disparage the other parent. Now, the problem with that is how do you enforce it? Because you really can't prove that fact. So you guys and the viewers, let us know, have you been disparaged as a parent? And what I've never heard of a case where a parent was actually held in contempt for it. But for the viewers out there, that's borderline disparaging the other parent, and doing it to the child is almost borderline child abuse. But I'll let you guys continue on. I just want to throw that in there for the viewers.
Well, to touch on that, it's not even borderline. That was a blatant issue there, telling my daughter that. And that was in our parental agreement. I believe it's standard that they're not supposed to disparage. But the courts don't care. And realistically speaking, when you're dealing with the courts, you're in a situation where you're kind of frowned upon if you were to take the other party into court because they said one bad thing about you. Things like this really should be nipped in the bud, but they're not going to take you serious, and you're going to end up looking bad in the process because they're going to be like, why are you in here in court because she said something negative towards you this one time?
And that you can't prove it, really. It's hard to
Agreed.
prove it because they're not bringing the kids in the
Well,
court.
yeah, you can't prove it because the kids, and I have a female friend with me, a girlfriend at the time, who witnessed it, but who's going to take her word for it? I
Right.
don't walk around with a video recorder all the time. So unfortunately, it's a position where you have to have a long history of it and some kind of documentation. And in some cases, even, and I'm going to refer to my case, even when you have a whole lot of documentation, they still don't care.
And he's described
Correct.
it personally, Richard, to me as shock. The actual word that I wrote down that he said that came out of his mouth was, I was shocked. How many parents can relate to being shocked when you know that whether you're with the ex or not, you only want the best for your children? So, I mean, for me, for all parents, we only want the best for our children, right? So a lot of people can relate to this. It's a shocker. So I liked his word that he used. He said he was shocked. What do you think about that, Richard?
I think in his case, shocked is probably an understatement, to be fair.
Okay.
And that's why I said at the top of the call that I think Chris has one of the most well documented cases of alienation that you see out there, in my opinion. And this one piece where your daughter says a comment to you about drugs, that's the hardest part of alienation to prove right there, that your daughter's saying something. You can't just walk into court and bring up that one thing because you're right. Then you look like you're irrational and you're just trying to come tattletale to the courts, right? And then you also have no way of proving it. It's just hearsay, right? It's you saying it. It's your girlfriend saying she heard it. And then your girlfriend
Hearsay.
backing you up doesn't look
Right.
that supportive, right? Because that
You look
person's
litigious.
obviously,
Yeah.
yep,
You snatched the words out
you
of my
do.
mouth. You look litigious. You look vexatious. You look like an angry parent. So
Agreed.
bringing it to court probably isn't going to do much. And it's a sad truth that 20 million Americans are facing. And the victims of this, to be frank for all of us here, is collateral damage is the children's emotions, the children's insecurities, especially in a young woman, a young daughter. I mean, that's the last thing she wants to know is the one man that's supposed to stand up for her is not perfect. And I don't mean to say that in the wrong way, but it's hard for a child to understand the concept of mom and dad are not perfect. But if you have one parent that says I'm perfect and the other parent is put down, it's really it's like you said, it's an understatement. Shock is an understatement. But I'll let you
Yeah,
continue on.
agreed.
I just want to weigh in every so
Yeah.
often for you guys.
So I want to jump ahead here and let's get to some good details. We're about 45 minutes in. So let's start to focus on winter of 2021, because that's when things really start to spiral out of control for you. And then later into 2022 is where you end up losing some rights. And we'll talk about that in more depth. So winter of 2021, you have visitation with your kids. Your kids come to Georgia. Let's talk about your first interactions with your kids during that visitation, picking them up in Arizona, and then some of the observations that you made about your son and daughter when you got back to Georgia.
Well, I picked them up down in, I believe I picked them up in Phoenix, location. But we went to the airport and we had a really late flight that we were supposed to be getting. So we sat in the airport for a good probably 6 hours. Um, Actually, we had a really early flight. I believe I picked the kids up around 10 o'clock at night or something to that effect, if I remember correctly. It was so late that it wasn't a point in getting a hotel room because we'd be in there for 4 hours maybe tops, and then have to turn around and go to the airport. So we just basically just posted up at the airport and waited for our early flight. I believe it was first flight out in the morning. But my, my son was a little bit disgruntled. He had, for the past two years, he had slowly started becoming a little disgruntled, borderline belligerent. He went from, enjoying going out, riding in a boat, going fishing, happy. My son used to be extremely happy-go-lucky. That was the best way to describe him. But he slowly started getting a little bit more belligerent, and this past the last visit, it really escalated. Um, I didn't, you know, you hadn't seen your kids since the previous summer. They'll be happy to see you to some degree, at least. You could sense that he didn't want to be there. He didn't want to be in my presence. To some degree, my daughter as well. She more or less was going along with it, but you could tell she'd rather be somewhere else as well. But it was pretty apparent with my son that he definitely did not want to be there. He was pretty much glued to his phone the entire time. Looking back, he was messaging his mother and mother's friend,
Yeah,
talking
so
about him.
let's talk about that a little bit, right? So some of the things that you've provided me, there's messages between your son and their mother's friend. There's messages between your son and his mother. And then there's group messages between your son, the daughter, and then those two individuals, the mother and her live-in friend. So I want to talk about first the messages between the son and the live-in friend of their mother, who is an adult, and we'll call her kind of like a manipulative aunt. That's what we'll call her, because that's really what she was to them. So December 19th of 2021, you pick your kids up. And during the time that you're picking them up or they're in your care and you're getting ready to board the flight and headed towards Georgia, she's messaging with your son, and your son's kind of talking with her about he doesn't trust eating the food that you provide him and that he's concerned that you're going to contaminate him. Could you talk to us a little bit about those concerns and how did they escalate beyond the day you picked them up until, let's talk about right up until, say, December 30th?
Well, just so the viewer audience is clear, I did not have access to these messages at that time. So I was completely oblivious to these conversations that were going on. It wasn't until, the 30th that I got access to these messages here. But I did notice after we arrived that he was failing to eat. And I didn't understand why at the time that he wasn't eating. The farthest thing I had in my mind was he felt like I was poisoning his food with urine or ejaculate. That was the farthest thing from my mind. I don't know anybody who would suspect something like that. That was just, the last thing I was thinking of. Because the belligerence had kind of slowly started getting more and more and more higher in degree, I initially just wrote it up to, he was just kind of acting out a little bit and being a little defiant, and figured it was something that would just correct itself.
Richard, who do you think would have said something like that? That a father would pee inside their child's food? Who do you think would say something like that? Just out of curiosity. I mean, this is a live stream. Who do you think would
Yeah,
even say
so
something like that?
I believe the son puts that onus on Chris, right? So the son believes that Chris told him that he was going to pee in his food, and from that point forward, he kind of takes it a step further and says, "I believe my father's going to ejaculate or pee in my food in an attempt to contaminate my blood." And I think it's important that we talk about the way the messages were conveyed, because it displays a little bit of the mental state of your son and the distress that he's going in, having his mother manipulating him, Debbie manipulating him, and then he's forced to be with you while they're manipulating him into essentially hating you. So let's talk about that. Did you ever at any time, mention to your son that you were going to pee or ejaculate in his food in any way to try and, in his words, contaminate him? And I'm
No,
sorry
no.
to ask you that way, but he insinuates it. So
I really honestly have no idea where that seed was planted, whether or not one of those two back there told him that I'd once maybe done that when he was a youngster, or that's just something he conjured up. Obviously, if you read the message like you have, you understand that there is a real disconnect from reality in his mind at this time, and probably still to this day. So I'm gonna assume it's something that he just conjured up on his own, and felt in his mind he felt that was a legitimate concern.
But let's talk about something on that same topic, Richard. Let's talk about for 1 second that this child had been told these things by somebody, and it was churned into a cup, I guess you want to say. It was just churned, this thought of this, which now causes the child to have physical and mental stress. So whoever put that in his brain, whether it came from himself, he continued to have these delusional thoughts. Now let's ask Chris, was there any other delusional thoughts that you've heard or continued
Well,
that would make you
hold
concerned?
on. Hold on just a second before you answer that,
Go
Chris.
ahead.
I want to wait just a second before we get to that because there's actually, we'll talk about how that gets brought up. But I want to read the message to you, right? So there's a message. This is between your son and the live-in friend of his mother, right? And he says, when I told you, sorry, and I'm going to try my best to read it exactly the way he types it because it's important for me not to read in the extra words that you would typically think would be in here. So when I told I am afraid of him peeing in the food he made or brought, I am also afraid of him ejaculating into the food or drinks because he is a monster and I don't want to be like him or have him be a part of me physically, mentally, emotionally. I don't want anything to do with him. Now, this is a message from your son to the live-in friend of his mother, and she reflects essentially this sentiment. She does say you wouldn't do that, but she feeds into the piece that you're a monster. And this is one message that's not worded the same or worded as poorly as some of the other ones that really help you understand the mental state of your son. But when you hear messages like this, how does that make you feel? And up until this point, have you or had you ever seen this type of behavior or concern from your son such that you felt like you needed to be working on something with his mother and communicating about maybe his mental health or his state of why he believes or has these concerns?
No, I had no knowledge of this. It still kind of blows my mind when I hear this over, even years later, that someone would have this actually truly believe this is happening,
Mm-hmm.
and basically, refusing to eat for an extended amount of time because they truly believe as irrational of a thought it is, in his mind, that was his reality and a genuine concern. And obviously, I didn't know about this at the time, or else I would have definitely taken some kind of corrective action on that.
So if the child has been trained that thought or been encouraged to think that type of behavior and call his father a monster, right? Which is a bad
And
thing to call
real quick,
somebody.
just to clarify, it's not just your son that calls you a monster, right? Your son, his mother, and the live-in friend all refer to you as monster, or periodically their mother refers to you as Georgia. They never refer to you by your name. And I say that because that is a very common alienation tactic to
Yeah, it's
start
called
to separate that child from the parent.
parental
Go ahead.
parental alienation by proxy. When you start involving these other people to believe these thoughts, you create a delusional thought that if I don't think like everybody else. Now, there's lots of studies that will show if you take a group of people and start getting them to believe something, there's one or two that don't want to. They usually just join the group because if not, they look like the standout or the one that's not thinking right. So for a child who hasn't have the ability to understand right from wrong completely, or what's real and delusional, this continued on. So let's move a little forward
Yep.
into how
So,
he wanted to get his child help
yep.
and what happened.
So to recap, your son shows up for visitation. He's messaging at the time you don't have any awareness of these messages. He's messaging his mother and his mother's live-in friend. He's expressing to them his fears of you contaminating his food, such that he's expressing to them he's not going to eat in your care. She hasn't communicated with you that he's expressing these fears. And when I say she, their mother or the live-in friend, to both adults, have not told you about any of this. They're not telling you that he intends not to eat. They're not telling you that he's banking up food that he knows came from his mother or his sister to be able to eat. So there's no communication, right, throughout any of this. And this is important because there is one individual who cares about your son so much so that she wants to go seek help for him. Let's talk a little bit about who is that individual and how did she try to seek care for your son through you?
You're referring to my daughter, I'm assuming.
That's correct. Yep, I am.
She was really concerned. My daughter was put in a very, very bad spot. She she received the same alienation behavior towards herself, towards me, that her brother did. For whatever reason, it didn't affect her to nowhere near a degree. Um, it affected her a lot less. Obviously she didn't have paranoid delusions and hallucinations, but she was in a spot where she couldn't really fully trust me at the time because all these years she had been told nothing but BS and how I didn't really care about them, didn't want to take care of them, wouldn't do anything. But on the other hand, she was also seeing the other side that her brother is having all these problems, and it wasn't just the problems he was having right then and there in the moment. There was a lot of things that she had experienced with him well prior to ever coming out to Georgia. Things such as, having hallucinations that myself and my fiance were there at their house in Yuma to come get him. Things like he was having fits about thinking about me and stabbing his pillow and other things in the house. Things that, she was 15 at this time, I believe, when a lot of these things were going on. So she didn't fully, it took a little bit for her to kind of start to see, like, he needs help and mommy's not getting this help. But her other option is this guy who she's been told all of her life is a complete, bag of crap, basically. And luckily, everything kind of came to an apex when I was there in her presence. And I guess she finally started figuring some things out and let me in on what had been going on previously.
So she kind of did two things, right? She one asked for counseling, which really wasn't for her, right? She wanted to speak to a therapist on behalf of her brothers. So is it safe to say that your daughter was the first person to notice that your son was being medically neglected by their mother?
Well, I'm not 100% sure now that that's why she was seeking.
Understood.
If memory serves, she did not, any kind of treatment they had received prior was many years before with a physician, a therapist out in Yuma. And apparently her mother was telling her that she would take them back. My daughter was wanting just my son to go, and she wanted to get her own therapist to talk to about whatever. And that could have been, bring up things about her brother as well.
Now,
But she didn't want to intrude and cut into his time. She wanted him to have all the time there with the therapist because she knew he needed it.
I think what we can agree on as the audience would be that the sister loved her brother to blow the whistle. Maybe because
Oh,
she loved him.
100%.
I would say, if anybody in the audience wants to agree with me, that the sister blew the whistle as siblings would, and that's why it's so important to harbor and nurture a good, positive relationship so that the child doesn't grow up with such a negative view on people that are such impactful or such an impact on their life. Now, let's continue
So
on with
your
it.
yep. So your son wasn't and hasn't been eating, right? We talked a little bit about that and why. Is there anything he was eating during that time that he had? And I just want to talk about what he had, and then we can go into December 30th, and we can talk about why you took him to urgent care.
Okay, I can shoot us through that here real quick. I had given my daughter previously a bag of trail mix I picked up from a Starbucks. And for all this to keep in mind, I had no idea why he was not eating at this time. I know I was completely oblivious to a lot of these things here. And I give him the bag of trail mix to my daughter for her to have. Unbeknownst to me, she gave that bag of trail mix to her brother, and she lied to him and told him that she had brought that back. Her mother had packed that for her, and she was giving it, that it did not come from me, but came from Arizona. She did this because she knew he hadn't been eating, and she was concerned and wanted to make sure that he got at least something to eat. And she knew that, or at least she felt that if she told him it came from Arizona, that he would eat it, figuring it was safe. And she did that. And this, again, I didn't know that this had occurred. And I ended up taking my son to the urgent care facility to make sure we could rule out anything, physiological that was wrong with him that was preventing him from eating. So I took him there, and he heard me tell the physician, I believe she had asked me, what has he eaten today? The only thing that I believe I told her, the only thing that I know that he ate today was a bag of trail mix that his sister gave him. I didn't know that she lied to him and that he was refusing to eat the entire time because he thought I was contaminating. So when we got back, the doctor didn't rule anything physiological out wrong with him. And I believe her notes was that, some mental health treatment or therapy would be best for him moving forward. And they released him with there wasn't nothing else they could do for him, that there was nothing physiological wrong with him. They counseled him on the importance of eating and whatnot. But when we got back, I didn't know at the time he was very, very upset with his sister for lying to him and giving him food that he felt like I contaminated. That she basically betrayed him and gave him this bag of trail mix, knowing it came from me, and was going to do whatever it is in his mind that he was concerned about.
So Richard, in this, the child's having some thoughts that are obviously not true. Father is concerned. Father takes him to the doctor. Doctor basically says, "Hey, there's not much we can do." Let's forward over to where he takes him to the.
Real quick, we can't just jump to the 1013 piece because we gotta understand why real fast. So you take your son to urgent care. He finds out that the trail mix he's been eating has really come from you. He was lied to by his sister. Now this is a second thing to him that starts to make him lose trust in his sister. The first thing is she wants a therapist and she asks you to set up that therapy. And your son expresses to his mother and at Debbie, so there's two things here. He first expresses to his mother that he's upset that the daughter is going to receive counseling, and he brings up the concerns that she's going to talk about his hallucinations and what he calls his intrusive thoughts. The second piece is he's messaging Debbie at this same time. He just learns that the trail mix has come from you, not his mother, and he now doesn't trust his sister. And at this point is when he makes what is the first written threat in a message against your daughter, where he tells the live-in friend of his mother that Dove, which is your daughter's nickname from your son, is going to be killed in Yuma. And this is a verbal threat that he makes to his mother's friend. And then that same evening, he doesn't just make a verbal threat. And this is where I'll let you pick up. How does that threat continue? So he's concerned about his hallucinations and intrusive thoughts coming up during therapy and you finding out about them. He's mad at his sister because she broke a boundary of trust with him and he was eating food that was provided by you. Now, how does this escalate into what is the first time you have to take your son to the hospital, not urgent care, but the hospital for some mental health care treatments?
Okay, what had happened, and again, I was completely oblivious to all this at the time here, that, his mind was completely, off track at this time here. Later on that evening, I hear a ruckus in the bedroom, him and my daughter were sharing, and I came out, and this was probably maybe 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I came to investigate what the ruckus was. I still don't know what the ruckus was. I believe he threw something at her. He was upset. But I believe my daughter met me at the door. She came out when I opened the door. But I took her into the living room, and that's when she finally, opened up to me and had told me that all the things that had been happening in Yuma, where he'd been stabbing, having these what she called intrusive thoughts, which was a term I'd never heard. I had to Google it. I didn't even know what an intrusive thought is. That's when she informed me about. She was actually a little bit upset with me because I told him about the trail mix. She didn't understand how it came down. That he had heard me say something to the doctor that I didn't know at the time. So she was kind of upset with me at first. Like, why'd you tell him it came from from me originally? It's like I didn't know. I had no idea. But that's when she opened up and told me about everything that had been going on down there. And we got into it, and I just couldn't believe it. When this is the first time I'm sure I heard about, he thinks I'm contaminating his food, and we get to his Facebook account, and I can see all this. And I'm able to see the conversations he's having and the threats he's making, that she's going to be dead when she gets back to Yuma and all this stuff here. I mean, talk about a roller coaster of emotions. I was upset. I was worried. I was scared. I was perplexed, just complete overwhelming. And, I'm like, how come no one told me this? Luckily, we heard something that caused me to get up out of bed and check. There's no telling what could have happened in the middle of that night. There's his mother and his mother's friends down there in Yuma, knowing that he's acting irrational, knowing that he's telling her that he's going to kill her, and they don't bother to pick up the phone to ask me to go intervene and see what's going on. And I believe the only message I remember when my daughter complains to either the mother or the mother's friend, there's a message there that she says, he's threatening to kill me again. Their
That's
response
correct.
was,
So to talk about that real quick,
just ignore him. He's being irrational.
That was right. So and to talk about that a little bit in depth, your daughter actually messages the live-in friend of their mother and says, "How bad is dad?" And then they go into talking about her inquiring, "How bad are you?" and saying that she's talked to you a little bit about child support, about insurance, and you've kind of cleared things up. You're making more sense. And she even goes as far to say that her mother is just trying to manipulate her and lie to her, whilst you're just trying to tell her an honest truth. So your daughter has just been threatened by her brother. Um, Her brother also made threats to the live-in friend of the mother because he felt like she lied to him as well about the trail mix. So you're concerned for your daughter. You have these multiple threats in messages. You have verbal threats. You have your daughter coming out and talking to you about him stabbing pillows and stabbing objects, believing that they're you and their house in Yuma. So she's fearful. She's also coming to the realization that she's being manipulated by her mother. She has her father sitting here trying to have an honest conversation with her, whilst also providing her the care that she's asking for and pleading for because she knows she needs help. Amazing for a 15-year-old to come to all these realizations, especially with the shortcomings in schooling and education and everything, for her to be so aware. It's just astonishing. But what is your response to this? How did you handle your son making these threats? What was your reaction?
Well, what I did is I called the sheriff's department the next morning. Well, first of all, I stayed up with my daughter all night. She didn't go back in that room, I don't believe at all. We stayed up all night. I called the sheriff's department in the morning to have them come out because honestly, I was hoping that they would arrest him. And, you know, and this is on the heels of me, finally getting access to his Facebook account where I could see all these things. And my daughter had told me about, being pulled out of school and them doing his schoolwork and the alcohol and the access to all the weapons they had from their deceased grandfather next door and all these things here. I was hoping he would be arrested and we would kind of take it from there. I wouldn't necessarily look at putting him in trouble, but I've never had to deal with anything like this before. I was kind of clueless on what to do. I called the sheriff's department. My other option, I guess, was to just take him to the airport and send him back home to his mother. That wasn't an option. I had to do something because I still had them for another week at this time, or at least 4 days or something of that matter. So I called the sheriff's department. And they came out and they determined it wasn't legally considered a threat because of the way it was worded. I don't remember the details of it, but because of the way it was worded, they didn't really view it as a criminal threat that they could actually take action on. But they advised me to take them to the hospital there in Athens, Georgia, to the emergency room there, and to tell them you're there for a 1013 evaluation. First time I'd ever heard this term, had no clue. Asked them what it was. They told me it was just a mental health evaluation. They'll know what you're talking about. So I go ahead and take him. And this is on the 31st. And this is New Year's night. Everybody else in the family went out for fireworks, and I went with him to the hospital. And we finally met with a mental health safety officer there. He interviewed my son. I have no idea what was asked. I wasn't present for it, but whatever answers he gave caused the doctor to do what was known as a 1013 committal. It was an involuntary mental health hold. And basically, in a nutshell, I could not, at that point in time, I could not stop them from taking him for mental health treatment. It was completely out of my hands. It's not something that I couldn't sign him up for it and say, hey, I want y'all to take him. I wasn't able to stop him. Even though it's because of the answers he gave. He was
Okay.
considered a danger.
So you're living in Georgia. You have a long distance parenting plan. Your kids are in your care right now for parenting time. You're having this issue play out. You've taken your son to be 1013, or not necessarily taken to be 1013, but you took him to the hospital. He was 1013. Just to clarify, at this point in time with this parenting plan, Arizona still has jurisdiction, correct? And I want
Yes.
to ask this question just before we get to the next piece. Cool. So your son was 1013. He was admitted to a facility. How long was he in the facility for this first go around?
I want to say he was there for probably about 4 or 5 days.
After that 4 days, how was he removed from the facility?
Uh, Apparently, his mother flew out from Arizona and went over there and pulled him out. I had been in touch with the facility is called Pathways. I've been in touch with him, inquiring as to what he was doing, how he was doing, and when was he going to be released. And the answer that I was given was the same every single time. He's refusing to talk to us. We don't have any information because he won't talk to us, and he will be released when we no longer deem him to be a danger to himself or others. And that was the answer I got every single time.
So his mother checks him out on January 5th. How did you feel about that? Did you feel like your son had received adequate care up until that point and was safe to be released? Or did you feel like he should have continued on care? And more so, how did the medical professionals that were providing him care feel?
Well, assuming that I wasn't being lied to by the center there when they told me he was not talking, I'm not sure how they come to the determination that he's no longer a danger when he doesn't answer any questions and doesn't respond. Uh, he was the only reason I even found out that he was being withdrawn from that center was a nurse who I'm certain wasn't her job to inform me. She called me up and said that you need to get up here. Your son's mother is pulling him out. You need to get up here and do something. So, by her word usage of that, that's not, she definitely wasn't supposed to tell me this, or it wasn't her job. Or else she would have just called, just let you know your son's being released. He's going with his mother, blah, blah, blah. He should be released at this time. It wasn't that kind of phone call. It was more of this is emergency. You need to get up here. I wish I knew her name. Hopefully she didn't lose her job if it came out, because she seemed like she was the only one who probably cared enough to make a phone call to let me know, he's being released, or else I would have had no knowledge of it whatsoever. Um, this was the exact same day I was supposed to be meeting with an attorney in Georgia to um, probably an hour after this to figure out what am I supposed to do on this, because it's not something that I don't think anyone really, has a plan in place. Well, if something like this happens, this is what I'm going to do. I had no idea what to do. I knew that I had a bad situation. I knew that the kids don't need to be anywhere near their mother right now. I knew my son probably didn't really need to be around my daughter right now. In hindsight, he really didn't need to be around me. I didn't really, in hindsight, I was probably in danger as well this entire time, just completely oblivious to it. Um, but my biggest concern was for my daughter's safety and for his well-being, because there was also suicidal ideations being expressed as well. So my only concern wasn't, is he going to kill my daughter? Is he going to possibly kill himself? We're dealing with someone who's having these delusions. You don't know what they're, you can't predict what their behavior is going to be.
Right.
Yeah.
So you spoke to a lawyer. Did you ever take action in Georgia?
Yes, when I got to my attorney and gave her the rundown on what was going on, I'm sure she took this is somebody I previously used. She knows I'm not somebody who just makes stuff up. I'm sure she took a cursory look at the evidence I had, and she was able to seek emergency custody for me with the juvenile court there in Georgia through
And
the the unified code that all states have for emergency situations. She was able to give me emergency custody of both of the kids.
So you filed a petition in the Georgia court on a temporary and emergency basis. You were able to get a Georgia judge to sign an order, and that order in particular was permitting you to take back legal and parental custody of your children, such that you could seek care for your son and continue care for your son, correct?
Yes.
And I want to read two statements out of the Georgia order on the emphasis that they make in this order when issuing it, because I believe this is not common. You will be very hard pressed to find any court in America that doesn't have jurisdiction in a family law case issue an order, even temporary, in that matter. More so, they'll tell you to go back to that state and file in the state that has jurisdiction. So I found it astonishing that you got another court that didn't have exclusive jurisdiction to even issue a temporary order. And I think these emphases make a big reason as to why. And it says the court emphasized that the dependency removal order, which is what the order was, because you filed a dependency petition, entered because the emergency nature of the minor child's mental health issues. The court also emphasized that the order was the result of mother removing child against the medical advice from the mental health facility. And these emphases are important because when you get back to the court system in Arizona, they don't agree with these statements. They actually make no findings relative to supporting these statements. So you get the dependency removal order from the Georgia courts. What is your next action after your son's returned to your custody because him and his mother did not leave Georgia? So the Georgia authorities forced her, I shouldn't say forced because it wasn't like he came kicking and screaming. Your son was put back into your care. What was your next action after that?
The next action I took is I took him back to the local emergency room. It was a different hospital, but right there by the home. And I took him to the emergency room there and told them that we were there for a 1013 evaluation. And he spoke to the mental health officer through a video. They didn't have him there in person there. He went to a room, they closed the door, and he spoke to someone. And just like the previous time, he was, whatever answers he provided to the mental health safety officer, he was deemed to be a danger to himself and or others. And he was 1013 again to a different facility.
And how long did he stay in the second facility?
I want to say that he was there for probably maybe a week and a half, maybe. I'm not 100% sure. And, you know, a lot of this stuff here is somewhat of a blur. You know, I had a lot of stuff on my lap at the time. And, you know, this was an avalanche of things that just landed on me here. So a lot of this is kind of a blur. I don't have really good memories about a lot of the little small details because it was just so overwhelming. But I want to say it was probably about a week and a half.
So how is your son removed from the second care facility?
Well, we ended up going back in court, and I don't even know if I was even there in court that day or not. We had another court case in Georgia where they had to, if memory serves, the orders they originally gave me custody was just a temporary nature. It was an ex parte hearing that we had with the judge. So, you know, her side of the story never got told. It was just strictly from me, and I made statements that I swore to. These are, you know, facts, and I was swearing that they were all correct. And that's what they made their decision based on. And, you know, it was all true anyways. You know, it wasn't nothing dirty, but that was the process. And I believe when you get an ex parte decision made like that, there's a time limit. They have to have another hearing 10 days after, within 10 days or something, so the other party can come in and present evidence or whatever they're going to do to contest what you did originally. And that was the hearing there. The courts didn't really, from what it seemed, they didn't really know what to do. They were presented with, you know, the same dilemma I had. We have a child here who is a danger to himself, who is a danger to his sister who's living with the father. He's got regardless of whether this hatred he has towards his father is rational or not, in his mind it's 100% true, and you can't be with him. And we don't want to give him to the mother because it's obvious that his mother is feeding into his mental breakdown here. The Department of Family and Children's Services would not take them in, either one of them in, because they were Arizona residents, and they did not want to get involved. So they kind of came to a conclusion that, well, he can't stay in a crisis center forever. The Arizona courts are going to do what's right at some point in time here in the near future. That's probably what they were thinking. I'm sure they had no idea what was going to come down.
Yep.
They end up releasing him to his mother on the conditions that he maintained the medication that he was supposedly getting, some anti-psychotic medications at Viewpoint, the second center, and his mother put him seek some kind of counseling, I believe a psychiatric evaluation, and ongoing mental health treatment in order for him to be released there. It was apparently, from what it seems like, it was the best bad idea they had. There
Understood.
weren't a lot of options.
So your son's released from care into the care of his mother, because out of the two options, that's the better option, right? You are believed to be his trigger based upon the alienation coming from his mother and her live-in friend. And then you also have your daughter, who's kind of receiving threats from your son and is fearful for her own life, so much so that she's spewing things and now conversating with you openly to try and help you understand and be able to help her about what's going on. So his mother and him returned to Arizona. Did your daughter return to Arizona with them as well, as she should have at the end of parenting time?
No, she refused to go back.
And it's safe to say that she didn't go back because she was fearful of going back and being in that house with her brother.
Well, 100%. She expressed, clearly that she was concerned for her safety, and she did not feel at that time, and it turned out she was absolutely correct, that her mother is not going to get him help.
Yep.
I remember her telling me that you're
I
the
agree.
only one who can get him help.
Yep, I agree with that. So they returned to Arizona. Your daughter stays in Georgia with you. You start a process in Arizona where you ask or submit a petition to modify legal decision making and parenting time. What were you seeking in that petition to modify legal decision and parenting time after that winter scenario and upon the return of your son to Arizona?
Well, actually, I had a lot of difficulty trying to find an attorney out there who would want to deal with this. This was right on the heels of COVID, and the court system and the lawyers were apparently just swamped with business because there had been such a backlog due to COVID. I had a lot of trouble finding an attorney out there. I wasn't going to get just whoever, I wanted a good attorney because this was the welfare of my kids at stake here. I wasn't just some kid fresh out of law school. This is his first case. I wanted somebody that was really, really good and had a good reputation. And they ended up filing a action against me, basically an enforcement action, I believe, because my daughter had not returned yet. So they were filing an enforcement action against me. And we ended up going to court on that before I was able to even obtain an attorney. It took me a long time to be able to find some. I had to go out of the county to find another attorney up in the Phoenix area. So the first action was an enforcement action. Once I was able to hire a attorney, that's when I was able to file what you were just referring to, what we were asking for. And what we were asking
real quick,
for,
though, let's talk about that enforcement of parenting time. Hold on, because I think that's important, actually. I did skip over that. So in that enforcement of parenting time, did the Arizona court, what did they order you to do as a result of that enforcement of parenting time?
they ordered me to return my daughter back. And this hearing was cut short due to emergency medical issue in the courtroom at the time. But before we even had a chance to even hold anywhere remotely close to a full hearing on the issue, their mother's attorney asked for the judge to sign an order requiring me to return the daughter. I had already been armed with a notarized affidavit that my daughter had written expressing her desire to allow the judge to let her stay in Georgia due to her safety concerns and not wanting to return due to that.
And real quick, to
That's,
clarify judges here, this is no longer Judge Cruz at this point, right? This is where
no,
we
this
get
is Judge
into
Mark Wayne Reeves.
Mark Wayne Reeves, and I'll say his full name here because I think he deserves to have his name
Most
plastered many
definitely,
places.
100%.
Correct. I think we're both in agreement there. So Mark Wayne Reeves, he's at this point you have access to the messages, right? Because after your daughter started to spill the beans, that's when you got access to the messages somewhere around December 31st. So you have all these messages. Are these messages where he's talking about wanting to kill your daughter, wanting to kill the mother's live-in friend, and then also your daughter's expressing other times that he's threatened to kill her because she's referencing again, right? Meaning it's happened not once, but it's happened before. Judge Reeves has access to all this information while he's making this determination of the enforcement of parenting time, along with affidavits of your statements and your daughter's, correct?
No, at the time now, he didn't have access. I don't think he had access to everything that I had at that time. I was there trying to find an attorney and was there to ask for a continuance. I had never been provided any evidence from the other party themselves. So I was kind of not even exactly sure what was going to be going on in that hearing because I never received any evidence. Turned out that her lawyer, Janet Metcalf, had sent it to an email address that I used to use probably 3 years before me and my ex-wife ever divorced.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I didn't have access to any of that at the time.
So
So
real
with
quick,
not me being provided any evidence against me, I'm figuring, you know, this is something serious where you definitely need an attorney in, and some kind of rational judge should have no problem doing a continuance, you know, to allow the other party to have adequate legal counsel there for something. So, I mean, this should be considered a big deal. As far as I'm concerned, it is. I have a hard time believing that any judge would not look at, you know, without even having all the small details, just looking at it from the outside. This is a huge issue here. You know, we need to take some time with this and get to the bottom of it. He needs legal counsel. But that's not the way it went. The only thing I was basically armed with at that point in time was the affidavit from my daughter and the medical. There was medical records from my son's 1013 facilities there that that
and
was something
just to
that was
clarify,
emailed to me.
you also had the Georgia orders too, right? You had a whole nother
He
court
should
that
have
reviewed
had
this
that, yeah.
case and determined that this is a severe case where we don't have jurisdiction, but we are going to exercise this temporary jurisdiction that we can under some federal law
Right.
that all the states have an agreement, right? So he has an affidavit from your daughter. He has some understanding of the medical care that was provided during the 1013 pieces, and he has a whole nother court ruling and pretty much stating that the mother is alienating and causing harm to the child, so much so that he's mentally distressed at this point.
Well,
What did they order you to do? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say more importantly to that, you know, they have it stipulated in the court orders that Georgia is making decisions based off of credible evidence that he is suicidal and homicidal. So that's not even something that was even contested or debated. So that was present there for Judge Reeves to see. Before the hearing concluded, again, we had a medical emergency in the hearing and had to stop early. Her lawyer requested an order requiring me to return my daughter. I protested to the judge. You know, you need to be able to see everything that's going on here before you do something like this. Here's an affidavit that I'd already provided to the other attorney previously already. You know, this is my daughter's own words, whatever, you know, it's notarized, you know, this is her thoughts. You know, I really honestly, at this time, I didn't know who Judge Reeves was and had no idea. I just figured, you know, he's just a normal, rational judge. There's no way he's going to make me return my daughter not knowing. No, there's no way he didn't know something doesn't smell right here. Maybe I should err on the side of caution here and hold off on doing something like that. But no, completely disregarding any evidence to the contrary. And granted, it was fine, but there was enough there for him to know, hey, you know, this one child was in 2 different mental institutions. They're saying he was suicidal and made homicidal threats towards his sister. The sister's got an affidavit here that's notarized where she's claiming, fearing for her life. He orders her to return her.
Did you return her?
No, I didn't.
Would she have returned herself?
She did return. She refused to go back.
Did you prevent her from returning? I guess I'll ask it that way. Did
No,
you prevent your daughter from returning?
absolutely. She never once said, I'm ready to go, or when are we leaving, please take me back, or any of this. The only options I really had at that point in time was I guess I could have drugged her and put her in the car and drove her. I could have took her to the airport kicking and screaming. I don't know for a fact that's what she would have done, but she told me that she would have done that. And I was not about to take her to the airport and deal with TSA questioning, why are you taking this child kicking and screaming? They're not going to let me get on the plane. I consulted with my attorney there in Georgia and explained to her, I have this order, I'm supposed to take her back. Obviously, she knows I don't want to take her back. I'm telling her what, my daughter says she wants to do. And she said, you can't do any of this. If you take her back kicking and screaming like that, you will be arrested probably for felony domestic assault.
I saw it pop up. I saw somebody in the comments say emancipation. You tried that, did you not? You actually dropped your attorney in Georgia so that she could represent your daughter and attempt to emancipate. Is that correct?
Not necessarily correct. In essence, she dropped me in order to represent my daughter to file an emancipation. She talked to my daughter and told her that, this is a process we can use to prevent you from coming back. I'm not exactly sure what the conversation was. I really don't want to speak on it because I don't really necessarily know the legalities of it, and I wasn't present for it. But I know that's something that she saw. My daughter agreed to file for an emancipation to prevent from having to go back. Because at this time, we didn't know what was going to happen, whether police were going to arrive and kick the door open and drag her, out of the house or any of that. We had no idea. I was sitting around several times wondering because I had to take her to the school and everything. I was worried, are they going to drag her out of the classroom or something? We lived for a long time with a lot of fear and apprehension as to, what's going to happen. I would have done everything possible to prevent her from going back. Luckily, I didn't have to do any of that because she was smart enough at this time to know the perils of what she was dealing with.
Right. So parenting time ends in Arizona. Your son goes back. Your daughter doesn't. They file an enforcement of parenting time in Arizona to try and force you to bring your daughter back. I believe the exact words is on some day at high noon, you'll drop your daughter off at the Yuma Police Department. In this time frame, I know that there's Janet Metcalf, the attorney for your ex-wife, tries to get, actually it's your ex-wife, I think, that makes the call, but they call the Yuma PD to essentially say that you're not abiding by the order that was just issued from Judge Reeves and that you should return the child. And in this exchange, there ends up being essentially the Yuma Police Department or Yuma police officer tells Janet Metcalf that your attorney essentially advised you and your daughter to not return, essentially, that you were told by your attorney to not return your daughter. And this leads to a letter from Janet Metcalf, your ex-wife's attorney, to your attorney in Georgia. And I bring up this letter because earlier you talked about emails not getting to you because they were sent to the wrong email. And when Janet Metcalf chose to write a letter to your attorney, in this letter, she set her up to say, I'll take your silence as an admission. She purposely did not mail this letter to the office that she knows your attorney's at and is publicly, I could go find it on Google right now where your attorney's office was, right? She purposely mailed it to the wrong place. Is that correct? You probably can't say for sure that she purposely mailed it to the wrong place. But you and I, knowing that we could go get this attorney's address, the letter was not mailed to her office, was it?
We're dealing with an attorney who's either purposely being deceptive or is very incompetent. And
we know she's
I
not
know
incompetent.
I because of prior similar events that have occurred with this particular attorney, I find it hard to believe that it was an accident.
Mm-hmm.
Was I sitting there at the office when she wrote the address down and sent it out? No. If I had to bet my life on whether it was purposely done, I would bet my life that it was purposely done that way, and I would not be sweating waking up the next morning.
So the question for the audience would be, does your daughter live with you now, or does she live back in Yuma, Arizona?
She lives with me now.
Very interesting. I think the audience would like to know that. And so because the brother and sister have a relationship where they're, the trust was broken back when she was seeking help from him, how is the relationship between brother and sister?
There absolutely is no relationship there. She has not spoken to him since I took him for his last 1013 evaluation. Ironically, when we were sitting there in a waiting room at the emergency department there at the hospital, I noticed those two were speaking, they were whispering really loud, and it looked like he was getting very animated. So I moved in to get a little closer because I was afraid he might would get physical. And I was right behind him. He didn't even know I was there. And I heard him tell my daughter, and this is the last thing I remember him ever saying, "I will be out soon. Mommy told me what to say and what not to say."
Richard, do you believe that if the mother didn't interfere with the medical portion of his treatment for the psychological issues, would this story have ended differently? And did the court get it wrong? Judge Reeves in particular, did he get this wrong?
Oh, Judge Reeves got every part of this wrong. Having or forcing the daughter to return, knowing that there's threats and then acts of harms that her herself are or is telling or bringing forth to the court and to her parents. It's crazy to force that child to return to that situation and be put into that home, knowing that she fears her brother. I mean, she fears that he could do something to her. And then secondly, there's a piece that we haven't even talked about yet where, Chris tries to go to the court and get just basic legal decision making for his son so that he can make sure that his son gets proper care and is put into the proper care, even when in his mother's care. And the court denies that. And the court doesn't just deny it on the basis that Chris is unfit because of some reason, X, Y, and Z. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Maybe that's how we'll let you close out, Chris. But Judge Reeves ultimately cared about his authority. He cared about his authority being questioned by another court. He cared about a parent going to the other court and using the legal system provided to him by the government that they tell him to use in order to provide the best care and obtain the best care he thought he needed to for his child, right? His son was going through a mental health crisis. His daughter's going through some tough realizations about the parental dynamic. And then all of a sudden, you have this judge who doesn't care about the best interest of a child at all. All of a sudden, he's just wielding his discretion to uphold his authority, has no care about the best interest of a child. In reality, set your ego aside. Let's not act like the best interest of a child becomes second to the authority of this court. Let's do what's in the best interest of the child, despite the authority of this court at any given time, is what we should be doing. Secondly, did the court in Arizona ever prove you to be an unfit father to either one of your kids? And then secondly, did they ever try to understand, hey, there's this child. This child has grave mental distress here. We can see it. He's going to facilities. He's making these claims. Did they ever try to understand, are you abusing him? Are you mentally causing him distress? Are you in some way traumatizing your son so much so that he has to pull away from you? He has to confide in his mother in a way that alienates you?
No, none whatsoever. There was not even a question of my unfitness. Post hearing everything, or even throughout it, I always kind of questioned, why is no one asking, why is this judge or no one asking, why do you have such a hatred towards your father? If you took the son's statements that he would make about me and look at his hatred as being, if you just assumed you were a neutral party and was listening to this, you should assume this child hates his father for a reason. We need to find out why. There must be some kind of an abuse happening here. But that was never brought up. It was never questioned. I actually invited being investigated. It was never, the only bullets that were being fired at me in the Yuma courts was my blatant, in their words, my blatant disregard for following through with the parental
Yeah.
plan and refusing the judge's orders.
I mean,
Those are the bullets
they say we're not used to anybody not following this court's order. They're used to strict obedience of their orders in your order.
Well, to make it worse, and I'll try to wrap it really quick here, we have an affidavit from my daughter. We have submitted a letter an affidavit from the guardian ad litem here in Georgia, who says, what was going on basically, and that my daughter is refusing to go back. Judge Reeves requires me to pay $1,200 to hire a best interest attorney who he selectively picks out himself because it's someone he apparently trusts and has used previously.
Mm-hmm.
This person interviewed my daughter over a video conference for over an hour and submits a report that my daughter is refusing to come back on her own volition, that I'm not behind it, but still yet in the final orders, it's all on me for refusing his orders and being the issue at hand.
They boldly you circumvented their authority, and once Miss Metcalf seeds that seed in Judge Reeves' head that you've circumvented their authority, and that's the only reason you've done any of this. There's no mental health issue with your son. There's no mental crisis with him. There's nothing going on there. You're just trying to circumvent their authority. Do you believe he did that?
Yeah, he didn't. That's all he was really concerned about. And to go back to what we were talking about before here, the only thing we were asking for in court was to maintain custody of my daughter, which should have been a non-issue because at the time she had turned 16, didn't want to go back anyways, and her mother wasn't even forcing her to come back really. During the previous hearings, she was fine, according to the Georgia courts, was fine leaving her here in my care. But the only thing we were asking for was to maintain custody of her and to give legal decision-making authority on my son, as well as, or in lieu of, an appointment for him to see a forensic psychiatrist, unabated by any parent, him alone, and get to the bottom of what's going on with him. That is the only. I wasn't asking for custody. I wasn't asking for more parenting time or less or anything monetary whatsoever. That's all I was asking for, was an opportunity for him to see an expert psychiatric person to evaluate him without his mother being there with him, guiding his answers, or without me even being there to guide his answers or anything. And we can get to the bottom of what's going on with him. And once we get those results, we can take it from there and figure out what we need to do.
Did they offer you any type of settlement before the court issued its order?
They did. And in essence, it was basically, you keep the daughter and we'll keep the son. And that's it, basically, which Judge Reeves even seemed to support. I don't understand why he even brought this up, but it was in the status hearing that we were doing remotely. He brought up the whole issue of a settlement and was discussing it in open court, which is very, very improper. Any kind of settlement discussions are supposed to be outside the judge. But he even asked me, it was weird, and I should have known at that point in time that things weren't going to go good, because he seemed to support this and asked me why I didn't agree with something like that. And you could tell right then, and I explained to him over my attorney's objection, she was trying to stop it because she didn't want me to talk. And rightfully so, because she probably doesn't know what I'm going to say. But I'm just going to say the truth, and I don't care if the truth's out or not. I'm not going to sell out the welfare of one of my children for the other one. That I find that insane to even bring that up. You're just going to pick one of the children to keep, and I'll keep the other one. There's no way. My job as a father is to look after all my children, not just one that I'm selecting here. It's my job to look after them all. And there's no way I could take it. I'm glad I didn't take that settlement, because, anything that happens to my son, I'm going to feel guilty on that. I sold him out. I'll let him go somewhere that I know is not good, just to protect my daughter. I shouldn't be no one, not just me, no one should be in a position where they have to pick and choose a certain child to protect and leave the other one to fend for themselves, basically. That's just ridiculous.
I agree.
And I think it's ridiculous for a judge to even, I think that makes her, the party who even presented that idea, I think that makes them look like complete crap, that they're willing to just give
They were willing to
one
cast
right.
away one child just to get keep one. We'll let you have this one. You just let us keep this one, right? It's a weird concept to think a parent walking into court and pretty much saying, I'll give you this one child. You just let me keep this one. And you have no say in the medical care or anything that's going on, even after these series of events that just played out that brought to light, a tidal wave of alienation that you weren't even aware of that just came crashing down on you because of, I'm pretty sure there was something being orchestrated to have you held accountable regardless of what happened during that visitation. I think that visitation went sideways because of the mental capacity of your son. I think his mother and the live-in friend were trying to set him up to build a case against you regardless during that parenting time, such that they could file something against you when you returned. And in the process of trying to get your son to be able to help them execute that plan, your son went off the deep end very far because they played on his mental shortcomings, not understanding how much further they were pushing him down, right? To the point where all of a sudden you had to deal with it and everything comes forward at one time. And you're staring in the headlights of a truck right as it's about to hit you, pretty much. You stepped in at the last minute. And not only that, you didn't go to the courts at any moment and try to ask for anything irrational. You simply asked for your child to be put into medical care. You simply asked for your child to be provided medical care outside of the observation of a parent, whether it be you or his mother. In my opinion, for Judge Reeves to simply wipe you out of the existence of your son due to that shows a wide abuse of discretion. For him to try to force you to send your daughter back when she's voicing her concerns of the threats and dangers that are happening in that home in Arizona and puts her own words on paper and signs it, that is an insane amount of discretion that nobody should be able to wield, because you could have returned your daughter, you could have obeyed that order, and you could have done what you were supposed to by the law's demand or by that court's demand, and your daughter could have been seriously harmed or injured, and then you would have had that accountability and you would have lost rights to your child. Or at that point, maybe they do take the mother's alienation serious, realizing, hey, we really screwed this up, and then you get forced with having to care for your son. And I don't say that in a negative way, but your son's been mentally degraded, not by his own shortcomings, but by his mother and this live-in friend. And then they're then going to have that cast upon you potentially if something severe was to happen to your daughter, right? And then their mother can no longer care for them, things of that nature. And I find it very interesting that they ignored every part of fact in your case in the court in Arizona, and all they cared about was upholding their authority. And a local lawyer played into her knowledge of that judge and pumping up his ego to say, no, you need to put down the gavel here. You need to show them that you have the authority and order that child back to Arizona, even though I, as the attorney, looking at all this evidence, know it's not safe. But I'm going to do what's, she believes she's doing what's best for her client. However, in that she was doing what is not in the best interest of your children. And as somebody who's a part of that family court system, she should be doing what's in the best interest of your children, just like Judge Reeves. And that's not what she did for you or your children. And that's a little sad to hear. And that's why I'm so interested in your story. And I'll let you close out with anything you want to say here. Feel free to say what you would like about the system, Mark Wayne Reeves, Janet Metcalf, your ex, the whole series of events, parental alienation, whatever it is.
Well, I kind of hate that we just barely touched into all these issues here.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much more that I wish we kind of broke this up a little bit so we could get into some more detail about some things here.
We can. I'm pretty sure we can work with Tony and we can get you back on in a coming week or two. And we can let you tell more, more if you would like.
It's really difficult to speak on because I used to be really mad about all this. I was mad for a good 2 years straight, and I'm sure I probably took a year or two off my life here being mad here. I kind of came to grips with what happened here. I'm not happy about it. I'm fortunate that my daughter got to stay with me, even though the Arizona courts did everything possible to try to drag her back there against her wishes and against mine, against what's should have been obvious common sense. Uh, my daughter's got quite a few medical issues with her that had been completely ignored for years. And since she's been with me, I've been able to, take her to the doctors enough and investigate it enough that we discovered quite a few things that's going on with her to address. Unfortunately, Judge Reeves just made the entire situation even more difficult for me to do all these things. There was a lot of financial fallout from this entire court case. Um, it just made it a lot harder for me to be able to help her out. And at the very least, again, it's not a great situation by any means here, but at least I got her. And I hate saying I was able to save at least one of them, but
You did, though.
it could have been worse. They could have dragged her back there, and we would have much worse situation on our hands here. But the positive is, I've been able to identify several of her issues that should have been identified years ago had she been getting the right medical care. And we're working on fixing those. And there's a lot of bad things that, she's going to be with me, having to be under my care for quite a few years because of these things that are a lot really debilitating and crippling for her that we're trying to fight through. And for her own personal, I'm not going to go into great detail about her medical stuff. She's more than happy. She can comment if she's watching and talk about whatever she wants to talk about. I would love for her to get interviewed at some point in time and get her perspective on how this entire situation has affected her. I don't really need any vindication from her on, what I've done. I know what I'm doing is right and what I've done is right, and she knows that too. So I don't need any kind of vindication, but for the purposes of awareness, people need to see how these things really affect the kids long term. And I lost a son from all this. She lost her brother as well. He has had
She
zero
lost a mother
contact.
too. I mean, she lost her mother, and it's her own mother's doing, but she did
She
lose
did.
a mother and somebody close to her, right? Um, she lived with her
She lost all.
mother for many years, so she had to be close to her. That couldn't have been easy for her.
Yeah, and I don't. In the short term, that's probably a good thing. To be honest with you,
I
as
don't
long as
disagree.
it's a good thing. But long term wise, it seems like when kids grow up a certain way, that's the way they are as adults.
Hmm.
So I got two children who are growing up that it's normal for them to have one single parent that's doing things and is the you know their guide in growing up. So when they get later on in life, the value of having two parents who are sane, rational people who are doing things in the best interest of those kids, that's a concept neither one of these kids are really going to have because that's not the way they grew up. And this is completely normal for them, so this is like hopefully it's not a cycle that's just going to repeat. It's I wish you would speak up more because of some of the things that's going on with her. It's difficult for her to you know she's not going to get in front of the camera and talk, but she very well may
Right.
do something audio or something, and hopefully she will do that and hear from another victim in this. Really, honestly, a much bigger victim because I'm gonna have to live with this a lot longer than she's gonna have to live with it.
Yep. I
So,
have spoken to her a few times via text, your daughter. Um, she's very short, which I'm not complaining or saying anything negative, by the way. She's just a very direct when she responds, and she's very short. And I think she does have a great story to tell, and I think her story is probably better than yours because she's the child in it, right? So she's the ultimate victim of these things that go on. She's the one that will have the long lasting impact more so than you as a parent, right? And I think it would be great for her to come forward and tell her story. Um, I think it would be great for her just all around. I think confidence, building personal skills, just things that we've talked about. I think it'd be amazing for her to come forward. So I'm going to keep trying to talk with her, keep trying to have her bring her story forward, even if it's me just taking it out of text and putting it into some type of audio for whatever it is. I would love to tell her story because I think you're right. She has the better story, and it's because she's a child that was vehemently involved in the day-to-day life of her brother, so she knows things that even you still probably don't know. and things that we'll never know about your situation, that she can also bring validation to some part of it. Not to say, like you said, you don't need validation, but I think it validates the story that you're telling. And not only that, that these court systems really don't care about the best interest of a child. And it really can come down to just the single judge you get. And you're hoping that judge is a rational, reasonable, balanced person. And all it takes is one individual like Mark Wayne Reeves, and all of a sudden you have no chance. And you didn't even know you had no chance before you went into that courtroom, because you believe that individual is supposed to be unbiased and doing their job by the law. And that is not what occurred in your case. That's not what occurred in my case with Judge Reeves. And I don't think we're the only ones that are having this problem. And yours is far more severe than mine. So long story short, I would love to tell her story just so I could get more out there on that abusive discretion that Judge Reeves wields, and how willfully he will do it against the best interest of a child.
So let's let Chris say anything he wants before he checks out, and then I'll talk to you, Richard, and then we'll give a nice closeout, and I'll give a few words tonight. So is there anything you want to say to the parents, or any advice you give to any parents that's been affected by parental alienation?
Well, there's no way I'm going to be able to do it all in a short
Well,
period of time here. But the one thing I want to make sure that I want to be guarded against is, if you're looking at my case, I can't imagine there being very few people walking around this country with a more provable and blatant case of parental alienation than I have. And I had a judge that completely 100% ignored it. I don't want people to listen to what's going on and just assume, well, my situation is bad, but it's nowhere near the alienation that this guy here talking to me is going through, so I'm not going to even bother doing anything about it. There's a lot of crappy judges. There's no way Judge Reeves is the average judge out there. There are judges there's got to be some judges out there that are they give a crap.
Well, you had one in Georgia, real quick. You had one in Georgia that cared.
Everybody in Georgia was great. They actually read that. I mean, they did basically the bare minimum you would expect.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the evidence objectively and make a rational, reasonable decision based on best interest of children.
So your advice?
It's take these things serious, but don't think just because it didn't work out for me that you're going to possibly have a case against someone. You need to be proactive in doing something about it, and don't let my story of failure prevent you from taking on your own battle, because unless you're going to go against Judge Reeves and Yuma, then that's a different scenario.
So don't give up. This is going to be
don't give up and actually pursue it. And my case is definitely, I think it's out there. It's an outlier because of Judge Reeves. And I know there's more crappy judges out there, but don't let, just because I failed in mine with a crappy judge, don't let that dissuade you from doing what's right by your kids.
So we'll let Chris check out with that one, and me and you, Richard, will close it out. Thank you, Chris, for joining us. And I'm going to come on here, and Richard, thank you so much for hosting this for our people, and I'm going to give a nice little speech before I close out. So I'm going to say good night to you down there before I say good night to the rest of the people. So let me bring it in as I bring you out. Let me bring you out. And thank you guys so much for joining Amuls Vision. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We only care about shared parenting and co-parenting that's effective for our children's rights, so our children can thrive. And this story is a true story of begging for help. A father's love, whether it's a mother or a father, we support both parents. Understandably, that this case, there is no winners. There's not a winner. No one won. The court looks for a winner and a loser, when the most important thing should be our children. No one's perfect. No one has a perfect future, and no one has a perfect past. We have to look at what God has gave us and make the best of it. Our time is not promised tomorrow, and neither is it promised here today. What we have is right now. So love your children, love each and everybody else, love others as you would want to be loved. Forgive as God forgave you. And as we end the night tonight, we just pray that you pray for peace for Chris and his children. We are not the real victims. The real victims are our children. So give the other partner a chance. Give prayer a chance. Try your hardest to make co-parenting work, because I can promise you 24 million Americans can agree that family court will only drain you financially, physically, emotionally, mentally, and that, my friend, will affect your children. There are no winners in family court. This beg and cry for help from a father is what drives us to run this program each and every week and for the rest of our lives. It's for the future of our children to have a better society. So let's make communication important. And that communication, let it start with God. I'm Coach Amul P. of Amul's Vision, and I pray that you guys find peace tonight and pray for everyone else's children. We pray that, Lord, reunite these children with their parents. We pray for equal shared parenting. We pray God touch those who ever think to alienate a child. Lord, we forgive them. We just pray that you touch them with love so we may break the cycle. Thank you guys so much for joining Amul's Vision, and we will see you guys next week at 9 p.m. I'm Coach Amul P. Thank you guys. And until next time, we love you, we love your children, and we love to hear your story. Parental alienation, let's end it together.